Everybody doing? All right, Genesis 37 through 43. That's 7 more chapters to take out here tonight. We'll begin in a moment. I want to remind you, if I haven't told you before, we will not be meeting next week. We're going to have a hiatus for Ash Wednesday. And then 2 weeks from tonight, we will complete the study. And then we'll pick up another one after Lent, I believe, but that hasn't been indicated yet exactly how we're going to do all that. Different things are coming from the life of the church during our Lenten time. But today, we're going to go from Jacob being the primary character, as he was last week, to one of his sons. And we all know who that is. It's Joseph. Joseph the dreamer, this 17-year-old precocious youth who says things that just irritate his brothers and, frankly, doesn't do much for his dad either. He's 17, as I say. If you look at 37 and verse 2, he was pasturing the flock with his brothers, and something happened. We don't know for sure. The tattletale had to go back and tell Dad, that the brothers had done something that he disagreed with. The brothers get angry. They're already angry, by the way, because he's the favorite. He's Rachel's son. Rachel was the beloved of Jacob, as you know. And so he can get away with anything. And then he parades around in this multicolored tunic or coat. But it's a full length. It goes all the way to the ankles. And he wears it all the time just to rub it in to his brothers. And you have to understand that coat is symbolic of choice, symbolic of Jacob's favor, and even some sense of Jacob's authority. And so they don't like it. They don't like Joseph. And it doesn't get better, does it? All right? The dreamer. He always dreams in sets of 2, or he interprets in sets of 2, as we shall see as we go through Pharaoh's dreams later in the chapters. All right, we're 37. We're starting around verse 5 through 10. He has a dream. And his brother sheaves bow before one sheaf, or the 10 or 11 sheaves do. And he has this dream, and he tells his brothers, and the brothers go, wait a minute, hold on a second, young brother. 17-year-old. You think we're going to bow to you? We'll never do that. Wouldn't you say that if you were an older brother? No, you're going to rule over us. Well, he has another dream. This time it's the sun and the moon and 11 stars, it says in my Bible. And wait a minute. Now he's saying that the whole family, including mom and dad, are going to bow before him. Who is this guy? Who does he think he is? Well, he thinks that God is speaking to him. At least he will think that later on in his life. The second dream is complete. His jealous brothers are so upset that they decide to take the flocks and move to Shechem, which is about 50 miles away from where they were. To get away from Joseph, I think, but also to start a devious plan. Well, back at home, Dad, Jacob, says to Joseph, I want you to go and see what's happening with your brothers. I want you to see if they're okay and if the flocks are doing well. We're still in 37. We're getting towards the later half of 37. And he says, please come back and give a report. Remember, he did that once. He tattled on them. All right, so he's going to send them out to do it again. Well, he gets where he thinks the flocks are. They're not there. He runs into a complete stranger who says, no. They moved to Dothan. They're further away, trying to get farther away from their father, further away from their brother, who they can't stand right now. And he shows up, all right? And I'm in now verse 18. He says, they all look and they go, here he comes. They see him on the horizon. Here comes Joseph. What are we going to do? This snivelly old kid, this dreamer, this stuck-up wearing that. Look, he's got the coat on. I can't believe. Do you believe he's wearing that coat that Dad gave him? Well, the plot thickens here as we turn to verse 20 and 24. They say, let's just get rid of them. They are so angry they want to kill their own brother. All right, we'll just kill him and throw him in a pit or something. Well, Reuben is like, well, hold on. Reuben's the oldest brother, kind of protect his younger, precocious brother. He said, no, we're not going to kill him. We'll throw him in this pit, all right? And he'll come later by stealth and rescue and be the hero for Joseph. And he says, okay, that's what he'll do. But in the meantime, they stopped and they say, after they throw him in this pit, they said, well, let's have dinner. I love it. These guys they weren't being eaten up at all by what they were doing to their brother. They were ready to eat. They were famished. Then Judah, one of the older brothers, says, let's not throw him in a pit. What do we get out of that? I think we should sell him for 20 shekels of silver. We'll sell him to the Ishmaelites or the Midianites. They're traveling together. We'll sell him there, and we'll make money on it. Dad won't be the wiser, and it will get him out of our hair. So that's what they do. But Reuben must not have been there, because he goes back to the pit, and he's gone. There ain't nobody in there. Matter of fact, it's actually a cistern. It's a cistern that just happens to have no water. All right? He was going to pull him out, but he's gone. He tears his garments, Reuben does, because he can't believe that this has happened, that he's gone. To prove their father Joseph was dead, they take his beautiful coat, right? And they take goat's blood and they pretend that he's been torn up by animals and he's dead somewhere. I don't know what they explained, that they couldn't find him because he was consumed by the animals, or that they had buried him out in the wilderness. Whatever it was, they came back and they showed the coat of many colors that's all bloodied now to their dad, and their dad is unbelievably forlorn. Well, Joseph, as you know, doesn't die. We are approaching chapter 38, and it says in the end of chapter 37 that they sold him to a guy named Potiphar. Potiphar is the captain of the Pharaoh's bodyguard. He is an important military official. And that's where we end at 37. And the reason I point that out is because 38 is a departure from the narrative of Joseph. All of a sudden, we go back to the guy named Judah, the Lion of Judah, the guy who wants to sell him instead of kill him. Nice guy. Let's sell him so we can make some money. All right? So anyway, if you look at it, he travels to a place near Bethlehem, and he meets a daughter of a woman named Shua, and we never know the name of his wife, by the way. He's unnamed Canaanite, and he marries her, and they have children, 3 sons, Onan, and I call Shelah, or Sheila. I would say Shelah. It sounds more Hebrew or something. Anyway, so he has 3 sons, and the oldest, what a name, it marries Tamar, but they don't have kids. He's not a good guy. He was the firstborn. He was evil, verse 7. And it says the Lord kills him. The Lord doesn't like this guy. He's wicked, so he's an evil man. I mean, if you get called wicked and evil in the Bible, you must be. All right? So what are you supposed to do in that society? You're supposed to raise up an heir if you're the second-born, all right? And so Onan is supposed to go in to his brother's wife, his dead brother's wife, and have children so that they can continue his name and his line of inheritance, or in an agrarian society, his land. Now Onan's thinking to himself, as I get down to 6 verse 11, 38, 6 through 11, he knows that if he does this, the child isn't really his. I guess even legally, he is the child of his brother, if he has a child with Tamar. And it's like, okay. He goes, wait a minute, I got a plan. It's a weird plan, and I want you to read it in verse 9. All right? What he does, he says, I'm not going to do this because I'll just wait till my dad dies, And once dad dies, all the inheritance reverts to me, and I don't want the kid who's not going to be my name anyway. So he pretends that he goes in there. I mean, he goes into the tent with Tamar, and the words are, he spilled his seed. Now, I'm going to let you figure out what that means, all right? He decided not to, you know what. And so God knows it and says God allows him to die because he doesn't do follow the protocol. He doesn't do his duty. So he spills his seed on the ground. The Lord is displeased, and Onan dies. All right? Now, Judah has one more son. He's kind of young, Shelah, and he said, I'm not going to let him marry her. I mean, this is a black widow. She's killed my first two sons. Tamar's she's no good. So he's thinking, okay, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to give it, even though that was what you're supposed to do. Remember, Jesus talked that with the Sadducees. Sadducees come up to Jesus and says, hey, a woman married 7 sons. Each one married the first one, the second one, all the way down to the 7th one. When they get to heaven, whose wife will it be? And Jesus looks at the Sadducees and says, this is why you're sad, you see. You don't understand the scriptures or the power of God. Go read it. It's in the Gospels. All right? Well, during this time, when he refuses to allow his 3rd son to be with his daughter-in-law Tamar, all right, we're still in 38, we're around 12 to 14, Judah's wife dies. All right, now, follow me. Judah is now mourning, Tamar is mourning, and his buddy, the buddy that he went to visit, that in verse 1 and 2, says, there's a sheep shearing. I'm just telling you what's happening here, all right? They're going to have a sheep shearing, and there they also practice some Canaanite fertility rites. In other words, there's kind of an orgy going on at the same time. Judah says, well, that sounds interesting. I'm going to go with you. Well, Tamar finds out that he's going to go to that sheep shearing, and on the way, she takes off her mourning clothes, puts on a veil, puts on some makeup, dresses up like a harlot, and stands on the side of the road. Here comes Judah walking by. I guess he might be with friends, but Judah's more interested in what he sees on the side of the road. He doesn't know it's his daughter-in-law, but they make a plan here, and let me get it so I get it right. All right. He sees the harlot, and he says to Tamar, how about if we make an arrangement here? He goes, I want to come into you. She goes, what will it cost? What are you going to give me? He goes, I'll send you a young goat. And she goes, well, how will I know? You're not from here. He says, well, I'll give you my signs of my identity, a seal and a cord, and you can hold on to them as a pledge and so forth until later when I come and give you the goat. She goes, okay. And she goes, okay, let's go to the side of the road here and get this thing done. And so they did, and she took off her stuff and put her mourning clothes back on and went home. Well, later, he sends the goat. We're now in verses 20 through 23 in chapter 38. But he doesn't do it himself. He uses his friend so nobody will find out. He discreetly sends the young goat through his friend. All right? They get there, his friend, and he goes to the people in that area. He says, hey, where's the prostitute that hangs around this place over here? There's no prostitute there. Never has been. So he goes back and he tells Judah, and Judah goes, shh, be quiet. I don't want to become a laughing stock of the town. I don't want to become a joke. We'll just forget about it and we'll just move on from here. Well, 3 months later, now in verses 24, all right, 3 months later, the man impregnated his daughter-in-law. All right? You can't make this stuff up. Anyway, she's pregnant. He finds out about it, and he's all huffy. You harlot, you should die for this. And she goes, well, hold on a second. You see these things I have here? Are they familiar, Judah? The man who's responsible for this baby, these are his. And he's like, oh my gosh, those are mine. the judge becomes the accused. He says, you're more righteous than me. I mean, I can't believe I've done this. And so the judge becomes the accused. He says, I don't want to be judged. I get to the end of the chapter, 27 through 30, the twins again. What is this, God? Why do you like twins so much? All right, twins come, all right, and one's Perez, and the other one is Zerah. And it's the same as with Jacob and Esau. The older will serve the younger. Because Perez, who reaches out, or actually Zerah reaches out, and he puts his hand outside the woman, and they put a scarlet thread to say he came out first. But he doesn't come out first because Perez comes out bodily first. Sarah follows, but he's still the firstborn. Now, the only good thing I think that was noted somewhere I read, that Perez is actually in the line of David, which means he's also in the line of the Messiah, Jesus. That takes us, Judah. He's not a great guy, is he? Matter of fact, he'll get slammed later on. All right, so we're now in chapter 39. 39, we go back to Joseph, and one of our most familiar story of Joseph, right? Joseph and Potiphar's wife. You know, Joseph is quickly found out that this guy is a leader. This guy is savvy. He's intelligent. I mean, he has what it takes to run my house, says Potiphar. So when he's out serving the Pharaoh, Joseph is running the house. It's called in the Greek oikos. Oikos means house. He's a oikos manager. He's a house manager. He runs it all. You could say that he's the steward of the whole house. You know, and what happens is if you read this, I love this. It says in verse 6 that 6b, Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. Remember, that's what they said about his mom. See, she had a great body and she was good looking. Well, Joseph is built, kind of like me. Anyway, and he's a really good looking guy. Let's change his name to Ralph. All right, I know, I'm going crazy now. All right. Anyway, he gets challenged, I should say. Actually, it is a challenge. The wife actually is very attracted to him, and she says, hey, lie with me. Now, understand, this is not an invitation. This is a command. I'm the boss's wife. Now, you will do this. And he says, no, I am not going to violate my boss's authority. And more importantly, I'm not going to violate God's authority. I will not do it. All right, verse 9, there's no one greater in the house than I. How can I sin against God? And so he moves on from there. And what we read is she doesn't give up. She doesn't quit. She sees him. She's lusting after him. It's not always the guy. All right. And she says, again, lie with me. All right. Lie with me. Verse 12. She goes, please, I need to have this. Well, the problem was this time he made a rookie mistake. He was in the house alone with her. And he had no witnesses. And again, he's like, all right, she has been hitting on me ever since I came in this house. I don't know what to do. Well, here's what I'm going to do. Next time she does it, I'm just going to run. See, Timothy, in Paul's epistle to Timothy, he says, flee youthful lusts. When you get in that situation, the Bible is very clear. When you are tempted, run. Especially sexual temptation. Run. And so that's what Joseph does. It's not saying that Joseph wasn't tempted. Joseph is just saying he's making the right decision. He takes off. But as we all know, she reaches out, grabs a garment and holds on to it, pulls it off of him, I guess, or tears it off, and he runs out of the house. All right? Now he's in trouble because now she has proof of what she is about to accuse him of. Well, we just got done accusing, right? In the previous chapter, Judah was accusing Tamar of sexual infidelity or temptation, and now we're seeing the story played out in Joseph's narrative as well. Well, the husband comes home, And this was after she'd already said to the servants who gathered around after Joseph took off, and she said, that Hebrew slave, that one that my husband brought into the house. You notice right away, she blames the husband. She was after the guy. So she's got to cover up, and say, this, that's what spouses sometimes like to do to each other, if you hadn't done this. Go back to Genesis 3. Adam and Eve, they were blaming each other, blaming the snake, blaming each other about what had happened. Blame game happens sometimes in marriages. Well, Potiphar gets angry, all right, because she says, hey, your slave tried to have his way with me. The word is, he tried to make sport of me, make fun of me. All right, and he said, man, that's it. I gave him the manager job. I gave him all this liberty, this freedom, and look what he does. Look what he does. He goes, and this is true, and it's earlier in the chapter. Potiphar says, the only thing I asked out of this guy is to make sure he had dinner on the table every night. I mean, go back and look at it. I wish I could find it real quick, but it's in there. All right? And he said, and this guy couldn't do that. And he violates you, and he violates my trust. That's the end of it. He throws him in a good jail. All right? It's the king's jail. So only some type of maybe like political or high-ranking prisoners go in this particular jail. He gets in there, and here's what happens again. Joseph has got to be quite a dude, all right, because he impresses the jailer like he impressed Potiphar. All right, this is the end of chapter 39, by the way, and the chief jailer says, this guy's really good. Now understand, he's really good because God is with him. God has blessed him, and God's grace carries him. And so he puts him in charge of everyone in that prison. And he takes over just like he did. He becomes the manager of the prison like he was the manager of Potiphar's house. Especially two of the Pharaoh's household duties, his staff. All right, and that's who we get introduced to in the beginning of chapter 40. Remember this important point at the end of 39. He prospers because of the Lord. Therefore, he is not, I emphasize, a self-made man. All right. Well, there's trouble with Pharaoh's kitchen help. Seems somehow the chief cupbearer and the chief baker gets in trouble. We don't know. Did they conspire against him? Did they try to poison him? Did they cook? Did they burn the bread? Who knows? Did he choose a bad red wine? We don't know. But Joseph was given personal charge, verses 4 through 7, chapter 40, of both. Now, providentially, here we go again. They have dreams, and they're on the same night. In both dreams, they also include the interpretation. Well, they had these dreams at night, and the next morning, they look like, man, they didn't sleep a wink. And Joseph looks at him and says, why are you so sad? I mean, hey, what's wrong, guys? And they answer, and they say, hey, we had these dreams and interpretation, and we don't know what they mean. We have no idea. So Joseph says, tell me what they were. And they respond, we had a dream, and he goes on and he says, well, God can tell me, and I'll tell you. Well, the cupbearer goes first. And he said, he saw this vine, and this vine had 3 branches, and the branches had blossoms and buds and wild grapes. All right? And then he squeezed it into a cup, the juice or the wine, and was giving it to the Pharaoh. Well, Joseph smiles and says, here's my interpretation. You're going to be fully restored in 3 days. 3 days, you will become the chief cupbearer again, and you will be restored to your old station. But one thing, verses 14 and 15, important. But keep in mind, when you go before the Pharaoh, will you tell him about my plight? I've been taken 2 times. Once thrown in a pit, and then secondly thrown in a prison. And I am innocent completely of both. Neither one did I warrant going to a pit or going into prison. Well, the chief baker is excited now because he figures, hey, he got good news. I'm going to get good news too. He says, let me tell you about my dream. And he talks about 3 baskets of white bread. I wonder why it says white bread. But it's white bread. I guess they didn't have Jewish rye back then. Anyway, they had white bread, they had baskets, and the basket on top, the birds were coming out and going after the bread. And Joseph thinks for a second, goes, okay, how am I going to tell this? But there was 3 baskets. He says in 3 days, those same birds, birds like that, are going to be picking your flesh off your bones, and you're going to be hung. Well, 3 days later, just like Joseph said, both dreams come true. All right, the cupbearer is pouring that wine into the Pharaoh's cup. It's his birthday. They're partying, having a good time, and they hang that other guy. And yet the cupbearer, let me get to that. The last verse in chapter 40. Do you believe this guy? Joseph saves his life. He tells him a favorable interpretation, and he never says a mumbling word about it. He shows no gratitude. I can only think of the 10 lepers, the 9 that didn't come back, and only 1 came back. No gratitude whatsoever for what this young Hebrew slave had done. Well, that gets us to 41. But I want you to notice 2 full years, 41:1, 2 full years later. Because that guy doesn't say a word, Joseph is in prison for 2 more years. Now, I don't care if he's running the show or not. He's still in prison. And Pharaoh now has a dream. 2 dreams, of course. There are always 2. All right? And he's standing by the Nile. And he sees these cows coming out of the Nile. The Nile is a god for them. The Nile is the source of sustenance, provides fish and water. So that's where the cows would come. And your provision or your prosperity would come from the Nile. The 7 cows he sees in his dream are fat and sleek. And then there's 7 thin and gaunt cows that follow. Well, then you have another, he wakes up. He's shaking it off. He takes some Ambien, and he goes back to sleep. All right? He dreams again, and this time he sees again 7 stalks of grain, and there's in the single stalk actually, and this is full body. But then he sees 7 gaunt and thin ones. Now, both times the gaunt and thin, or the lean, ate up the fat ones. Both with the cows and the stalks. Well, Pharaoh wakes up and he goes, what in the world's going on here? Call out. It's probably 7 a.m. Man. He wants to know right away. He wants to know what in the world's going on here. And so he could get my best magicians, call my dream specialists to come and tell me what my dreams mean. You know what they say? We haven't had it. We don't got a clue. We don't know what it's saying. Well, finally, the ungrateful cupbearer says, I do. I know somebody. And he tells the story. And so they pull Joseph out of prison. First thing they do is they wash him down because he stinks. And they give him a haircut and they shave him. But he is about to change. His life is about to change drastically. He's going to go from the pit to the palace. And right in a real hurry. And by the time he interprets these dreams. All right, 14 through 24, if you're wondering where I am. Pharaoh then he says to him, I have a dream. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? I had a dream. I want you to interpret it. Jacob, as always, says, not me, but God will. Say that's important later because Pharaoh will recognize Joseph's source. All right, that's important. Not me, he says, but God. This is my dream. And he tells him the dream, the one about the 7s, and I'm not going to repeat it. And Joseph goes, well, you know something? That first dream and that second dream, they're really the same dream. All right, same dream. And then he interprets. Those good cows, those good ears, 7 years of abundance. I mean, like you've never seen in Egypt before. But then, after that, you're going to have 7 lean cows and 7 lean ears or scrawny. And that's going to be 7 years of the worst famine you've ever seen. 7 years of famine will consume the 7 years of abundance so much as if the 7 years of abundance never happened. There will be nothing left, what he's saying. We'll find that out in 2 weeks. Well, God repeated the dream to you. This is why. A couple reasons. He wanted you to know the severity of the famine and of what's going to happen to you. Number 1. 2, he wants to tell you and show you who's in control, Pharaoh, and it ain't you. All right? And by the way, it's coming very, very soon. So you need to do something about it, and you need to do something about it now. Well, Pharaoh takes that advice seriously. All right? And Joseph actually gives him more advice, first of all, and he says, here's what I would tell you to do. This is Joseph's leadership advice. First of all, clever. He goes to interviewing for the job. I think you need to find a man who is wise and discerning. Somebody who can run this whole program, this whole plan for the nation of Egypt. You find that man, all right? Then you let that man put together a team of overseers. And you take 20% of all the crops grown for those 7 years, and you put them away in granaries that are yours, Pharaoh. Pharaoh will like that. They're under his control. All right? And we'll stuff those granaries till they're full. There'll be great suffering, but you will survive. See, God reveals the future. This is another important point. But we still have to prepare for it. Well, everybody, verse 37, everybody loves the plan. Hey, that sounds good. All right, I'm way over here now. All right, I got to turn my page. Sounds like a song. Anyway, Pharaoh earlier said, can we find a man with a divine spirit? Well, that's because Joseph had ascribed his ability to interpret to God. All right, he discerns that he has special revelation, and he should be the man. And that's how they're going to refer to him. The boys back in Canaan are going to refer to Joseph, not as a boy anymore of 17, not a teenager that's irritating you, not a dreamer. They're going to see him and they're going to go, he's the man. All right. Well, Pharaoh then creates an office here, as we're near about 38 and on, an office of prime minister. Isn't it amazing? Here's a guy couldn't rub 2 nickels together, and now he is Pharaoh's second-hand man. I mean, he gives him all the power he wants, all the power to make this happen. He gives him symbols of royal authority. Here's what has happened now. He goes from the pit to the palace. He goes from a multicolored coat to royal garments. I mean, Joseph has made it. And he'll ride in the seat of honor, the royal chariot, the one right behind the Pharaoh. There is nobody. And people in that land, imagine this. This guy who was living in prison for 2 years, this guy who Potiphar's wife had tried to get him killed, if you will, or at least thrown into prison, is now, if she walked by him, she'd have to bow to him. I love it. What goes around comes around. Come on. All right, verses 44 and 45 in chapter 41. Joseph is then given an Egyptian name. He's given an Egyptian wife. Remember? That's what Hagar did for Ishmael. She gave him because she was Egyptian. We got Egyptians in our family, guys. Now, Joseph is 46 through 49. 46 says he's now 30 years old. He's 30. 13 years have passed. A lot's gone under the bridge here. He's a lot wiser, and he's really gifted. He has 2 sons during the 7 years of abundance. One is Manasseh, which means forget. He has forgotten the past. He's forgotten what's happened to him. He's moved on. He names his second Ephraim. Ephraim means fruitfulness, prosperity. He now lives a life of prosperity. The famine begins, and people from Egypt, but from all over, begin to come for grain. God uses Joseph to bless the world. You see what God has done in his life. So when we think we're not, I don't know if it's a word, but we're not usable, think again. Joseph, they tried to kill him. They sold him into bondage. He spent years in prison, and God used him to bless not only Egypt, but ultimately his own brothers and the Mediterranean. God blesses the outsider. This Hebrew slave blesses the outsider. Or God blesses the outsider through the Hebrew slave. I'm sorry. All right, 42. We're moving on. They're back in Canaan, and the famine has gotten severe. I love 42:1. Please be with me on this one. You know, he's back in Canaan, and Jacob walks into a room. I'm seeing all the brothers sitting around, and he goes, "What are you looking at? Why are you staring at each other? You know, the solution's not here. The solution's in Egypt. They got grain there. Everybody's going there to get grain to stay alive, to feed their cattle. All right? Stop looking at each other and get off your butts and get going. There's grain there," he says. Upon arrival, verses 6 through 9, they get to a granary, I presume, and who's there? Well, they don't know it, but it's Brother Joe. He recognizes it. And here's what happens. The fulfillment of the dream in chapter 37. The brothers bow before the man. They pay homage. And now that dream, that first part of that dream that has been fulfilled. Later, the second dream will be fulfilled as well. Well, he looks at him and he seems to treat him abruptly, almost cruelly. He looks at him and says, "You're spies. You're here to spy on the undefended parts of our country." And they're like, "Wait a minute, we're just here to buy food. You know, we're hungry. And by the way, we're the sons of one man. Would another tribe or nation send in a group of spies and they're all brothers? Of course not. No, we're of one man. We're just here to get some food." But Joseph pushes him, and there's a reason he's going to push him. He says, "No, you're lying. You're lying. I know you're lying." They say, "We're all brothers again." Now they give a few more details. See, that's what Joseph wants. He knows who they are. He's trying to pull it out of them. They give additional details. There's one brother we left in Canaan, and the other brother is dead, or so they think. And Joseph says, No, you're lies. You're lying. Throw them all in jail. Let them think about it. Send one brother. Okay, this is the first plan. Send one brother back. Keep all the rest in jail. So he lets them sit there for 3 days. And you got to believe it feels good. He says, let them find out what it's like to be imprisoned or incarcerated. Anyway, after 3 days, he revises his plan. He says, listen, okay, you can all go back, but keep one brother back. All right, as surety that you're telling me the truth. He's really what he's doing. He's trying to get Benjamin to come back. And he goes, bring the youngest back to prove to me your integrity and that you're telling me the truth. And they're like, oh no, that can't happen. We can't do that. Well, they do it. You know, and they leave Simeon back, and Simeon was put in jail, and they fill up their sacks with grain, and they put the money that they paid for the grain back in the sacks. All right? And the brothers are talking about among themselves, and Reuben, you know, first of all, what they say is, 21 through 23, 42, what they say is, what goes around comes around. This is important. They begin to feel guilty about what they did to Joseph. If we hadn't done this, and Reuben, remember he was against the plan. He comes out with his told you so speech. I told you so not to do this. Now see what's happening to us? And as I said earlier, Simeon, not Reuben, is incarcerated, and Joseph fills the sacks with money. Well, later as they're going back to Canaan, they stop to have a rest to water their donkeys or whatever, their burros, and they're opening the sacks, and they look in and they go, oh my gosh, all the money's here. Wait a minute, how did our silver get back in here? Now we're in real trouble. Simeon's back there. They're going to find out that the money's gone. They're now not only going to accuse us of being a spy, they're going to accuse us of being thieves as well. What is God doing? They ask the question in verse 28. I can't believe this. God, have you ever asked, when you look at your life, God, what are you doing? Anyway, they return to Canaan, and they have to explain all this to Jacob, their old father. And they tell him the whole story about the man, all right, and about Simeon being back there, and how the man wants them to bring everyone back with, including Benjamin. Benjamin. Now, at first, Jacob says, I lost Joseph. I just lost Simeon. I'm not going to lose Benjamin too. Not going to do it. In other words, Simeon, I guess you're going to die, or you're going to stay in prison for the rest of your life. But eventually, we'll get there. Anyway, last chapter tonight, 43. First verse. Famine is very bad now. Famine is very bad. No more food. Jacob has to relent. He says, I guess we got to go back to Canaan. I hate the idea. He says to Judah, but Judah said, he says, hey, the man said, don't come back without Benjamin. See, that was Joseph's whole plan. He wanted his little brother, his full brother, if you will, because they had the same mother, to come back. He wants to see him. All right, so Israel says, why did you tell him about Ben? And the boys are saying, Dad, he was just asking questions. We were just answering them. We didn't know he was going to say, Benjamin has to come back too. Well, Judah finally says, if we don't take him back, we're all going to die of starvation. So we have no choice. We got to take him back with us, Dad. And if something happens, I will take the blame. And by the way, I love what he says. Because of this delay, we could have traveled to Egypt twice already. Meaning, how's the man, Joseph, back in Egypt, going to interpret the fact that we haven't come back yet? Anyway. Well, Israel, which is interesting, he changes his name in this, and he goes from Jacob to Israel. Because now he has to act like Israel and not like Jacob. He finally gives in to the logic that they have to go back with Benjamin because they need more food or they're all going to die. But he says, you got to soften this guy's heart. This guy's got you over a barrel. I want you to take a bunch of gifts, and he names them all. He goes, take double the money, all the money that they put back in the sacks for the first time around, and then all the money that you're going to buy grain the second time. And they were afraid because they figured, this guy is not going to be very happy that he thinks now we also stole money. All right? So, well, they get there, and Joseph is like, he sees Benjamin. And, his heart is just leaping. And he says, we're going to have lunch at my house. And so he has them all come together for lunch. And this is when the boys get together. Joseph's out doing something. And they confess to the steward. They said, we better get ahead of this. We better tell about the money that we found in the sacks when we left the first time. And so they tell the whole story. And guess what? The steward knows. Everybody knows that Joseph did it on purpose. The steward says, peace, the word shalom. Don't worry about it. God, the steward is saying this. God is responsible for your good fortune. All right, as we're wrapping it up now, 36 through 34. Joseph then shows up for lunch, and he sees the guys all waiting around at the table, I guess, or whatever they eat at, and he looks over at Benjamin, and he can't believe it's him. He can't believe he's actually seeing him. And he starts to swell up, and he starts to tear up, and he runs out of the room, and he runs to his bedroom, and he falls down, and he breaks down, and he weeps. The whole house hears him weeping. He then cleans up his face, and I love it. He goes out back into the place where they're eating. And he looks at the guys and he says, let's eat. All right. But a curious thing happens. Joseph does not eat with them. He does not. Egyptians don't like shepherds. He doesn't want to associate with them. It's not protocol. So he keeps to his own protocols and eats separately from his brothers. But he sets up the table as an indication something is odd. And as you look here, I'm sitting at a table and looking at chairs. He starts with the oldest. And he goes all the way to Benjamin, the youngest. And to Benjamin, in conclusion, he gives him 5 times as much. I'm thinking, how much food Benjamin, is he a big boy or what? Anyway, he's young. Essentially, in conclusion of our study tonight, chapter 43, what he's done for Benjamin is made him the guest of honor. All this that he did to those brothers, not only was he getting back some, I think he was loving what he's making these brothers go through for what they did to him. But more importantly, he was trying to bring his younger brother, his full brother, as if you will, and bring him to the table and give him the honor that he so richly wanted to give him. Isn't that wonderful? That's how we end this. In the next 2 weeks from today, we will go from 44 to 50, and we'll end in that day. And then from there, we're going to be doing some things at the church. The week after that, 2 weeks from now, I'll tell you what it is. You're going to hear more. I'm going to be doing some of it. Other members of the church are going to be doing it. Anita's going to be doing something. So it's going to be fun. It's going to go through Lent. And afterwards, we don't have an exact date. Here's what the next study. Are you ready? Drum beat. Anyway, drum roll. I'm going to do the Sermon on the Mount. I love the Sermon on the Mount. So I'm going to ask you to join with me from Matthew 5, 6, and 7. You could read it ahead of time, if you will, but we're going to be doing that one verse by verse, probably sometime in April. So looking forward to doing that, and I'm glad you stayed with me through it. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for your love, and thank you for this story. Thank you for Joseph, and thank you, Lord, that he in a way prefigures another Joseph. A Joseph who also received dreams from you and was your earthly father. And he was married to Mary, of course. And Lord, dreams tell us something. And you have used dreams to instruct us. You have used dreams to inform us. Lord, may we dream about how we can be like Joseph. Be filled with the divine spirit, as Pharaoh said, and be used like he was to bless the earth, to bless people around him. Lord, bless us so that we can be a blessing. In Jesus' name, amen. Good night.